work, we will probably end up posting it back to Facebook too. So I think without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers for this evening. Josh and Tara Dukart have been practicing holistic management since 2008 by identifying and working toward their financial, environmental, and social goals. They speak, teach, consult, and coach upon request throughout the United States and internationally. The ranch in Western North Dakota focuses on using the principles of holistic management to regenerate and enhance their land, animals, quality of life, finances, and community. They have made major career changes, important family decisions, and managed resources with the help of the holistic context they created together. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Josh and Tara, and I'm going to make you guys a host here, and then you should be able to share your screen. Okay, that should be coming through to you guys.
Okay, are we up and going?
Yes, I can see your picture, your smiling faces.
Okay, I'm not sure what family that is, but they look good. All right. You know, as we were putting this together and trying to decide how to best title really what's been our journey from crisis management to holistic management, and making honestly that conversion or that journey more than once, depending on what topic we're discussing. We decided to call it Why We Seek and Keep Seeking. And our goal is by the end of this particular presentation, you will fully understand why that title and why it's important to us. So Why We Seek and Keep Seeking, from crisis management to holistic management. You know, there are plenty of challenges in agriculture, and we certainly weren't immune to any of those in particular. I want to list a few, and we'll dabble in them just a little bit. One of those being many times it's like we don't have enough time. There's not enough hours in the day. There's not enough hours in the week. The seasons get too short. We get to a time of the year where the sun starts going down sooner, and we just wonder whether we're going to keep up. So that tends to be one of the challenges that we've experienced, and certainly many others as well, I think. The idea that you can't clock out. You know, there's good and bad that comes with that. If you really love what you do, the fact that you don't have to clock out can be good. But there are many times where we're being on call around the clock and not being able to clock out can really start to run its course from an energy standpoint, if nothing else. There are certainly circumstances that are beyond our control. There are things that we can't control as much as we would like to, as much as we would like to be able to just direct things exactly according to our plan, especially in agriculture. There are circumstances that we just can't control. There's a fair bit of unpredictability. It relates probably to a lot of these circumstances, but this unpredictability leaves us a bit vulnerable. We make plans, we have a direction many times that we want to go and how we think it's going to work. And then there's one or more variables that get tossed into the equation that really leave it unpredictable for us.
This next one, confusion of roles. This is something that I will admit I really, really struggled with in our transition to the ranch. We moved here about 4 years ago. So in 2016, we started transitioning about a year prior. And I did not grow up on a ranch. I don't have a farming or ranching background specifically. And I really struggled with what my role would be as what jobs I would fulfill. I didn't particularly think that I was qualified or able to be an asset to the different things that needed to help on the ranch. And so one of the big challenges that kind of encompasses all of these that I experienced and then we experienced as a family was when we weren't able to work together, when Josh would be out kind of putting out fires out on the ranch somewhere outside for those things that were circumstances beyond our control or things that we didn't predict, like not enough water to the cows, a sick animal, weather, different circumstances. I'm sure you can relate. It felt very scary for me, or very unsettling, that he would be out there doing his thing and I really wasn't sure what my role was really to help. So just kind of some of those confusion things, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go.
And of course, lack of profitability is always, anytime you run your own business, or even if you're not running it by yourself, if there's partners involved or there's multiple generations involved, or even if you're not alone in running that business, the profitability thing is, it's the lifeblood of that particular business. As much as we might really enjoy what we're doing, if it's not bringing in a profit, if you're not able to pay the bills, if you're not able to take care of yourself or your family, that's a large stressor. And I think if we're involved with agriculture, it's not something that's a given. It's something that takes time and effort, and still has no guarantees at the end of the day. Now, one of the things that we wanted to cover here, and it's one of those things that when you, at least speaking on my behalf, is when I would become stressed, or when I would get to the point of being overwhelmed, or just maybe really struggling with the challenges that were in front of us, we tend to, I think, resort to coping mechanisms or ways of managing that don't necessarily fall in line with what our long-term vision might be, or what might even be logical or rational. It just has to go with our fight or flight mode, our survival mode. So some of our, I guess, conventional or typical solutions at times when we're under that level of stress were some of these things. It's putting in more hours. Now, no doubt, there are days or even weeks or seasons where putting in more hours during that particular time versus other times of the year is going to be appropriate. I'm not suggesting that there isn't hard work or anything like that, but when it went from being acute to being a chronic thing, that we just less sleep, more work, more hours each day, those sorts of things, then all of a sudden it's maybe not something we can just accept anymore, or at least we didn't want to. There were times where we would look at, well, if we just had this tool, or we just had this piece of equipment, or if we just had more animals, or if we just had this, that, or the other thing, which all of those in many cases required more money if we were going to have those things, at least have them soon. So borrowing more money or finding more money to spend on these things became one of those, in some ways, more impulsive ways of trying to deal with or find a solution to our particular problem. Another one is this idea that, well, if there's something that worked for someone else, I would like that recipe. If there's something that worked for a different farm or ranch, or for another family or another individual, well, what's your recipe? If I can just get that and apply that on my place, then we will be better off. It'll give us over the hump.
Yeah, tell me what to do and how to do it.
And if we had those specifics, then it just, in my mind, it would work. And of course, I knew better because every place has some similarities maybe, but also has some unique attributes. So this recipe thing was another one of those coping mechanisms of, hey, when you're sliding downward and you're really trying to grab onto something, this was another one of those solutions. And of course, the last one here, I think, just comes with any time that we're maybe under stress or don't take a very intentional approach about looking at the whole situation and deciding what are we going to do that's positive. I think we can find ourselves, and I've certainly been here before, where we just complain, we commiserate, we find someone else that's willing to do that with us, which doesn't honestly probably help us much, but it continues that type of mindset.
And I would add to that, I think oftentimes we find that we're simultaneously complaining about not having enough time, but then spending time, or in my opinion, actually wasting time by choosing to complain and find others to complain with and do that commiserating. So just some of these typical things, maybe in the short term, you vent, you complain, you might feel better, but in the long run, we know that it's not serving us and it's not serving our operation.
And if you look back at the previous slide where we talked about the particular problems or challenges, and then you look at the particular solutions that we have listed here, and this is not an all-inclusive list. All of us could probably add some more to it. We really just didn't gain us a whole lot. And yet, for some reason, there are days or weeks that we would just continue with this particular recipe or this particular approach.
So when we did recognize that we were kind of in falling into the trap of that crisis management mode, where we were focused more on our problems, we wanted to ask ourselves, okay, is this how we want it? Or is this exactly how we want it right now? And that question really helps us shift our intentionality and shift our focus into being intentional about how we are spending our time, and what problems we have, and what solutions that we might tend to focus on.
And we've given each other we've given each other permission to ask this question. And of course, we, in the heat of the moment when we might be frustrated with something, we've given each other the permission to ask questions to keep each other accountable to what it is that we really want. And in the moment, this question isn't always easy to hear, simply because if we're upset about something or frustrated or overwhelmed with something, of course, this is maybe not how we want it. But since we gave that permission, this is a question that can be the first step in getting things maybe back on track.
And even though we know that there are still going to be some things that will come up for us and for everyone else, that will be things that were minor or major interruptions, stuff that was not predicted, or things that might have come into play that we now we have to deal with it. So there always are going to be those times when we have those kinds of interruptions, and but ultimately it's our choice how we handle those things. And this Bible verse is something that we choose to bring ourselves back to. When we did decide to transition to the ranch, we are the third generation here, and our kids are the fourth generation. And we wanted to have kind of a vision and a mission statement, a name for our place that really represented what we were doing and why we were doing it. And so we came up with the name Seek First Ranch, primarily off of this Bible verse that you can see on your screen from Matthew 6:33. So for us, seeking first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be given to you. That was a meaningful verse for us because from our own personal experiences, sometimes we just recognize that if we were feeling really overwhelmed and really bogged down, it was oftentimes because we were choosing to focus on our circumstances and not turning our focus onto the God of our circumstances.
And so you might be asking, how specifically then does this play into our decision making? And it really, honestly, was a bit of an aha moment for us when we started diving into this. And then you combine this with the other things that we have learned, the mentors that have been there for us, the friends, the neighbors, just everybody that's been there supporting us. And the things that we've learned through all of that is, well, the aha moment was this. It really is not about having the right answers. It's about asking the right questions. And really, we believe that's where it starts. And as much as we want the answers, and sometimes we just want them now, we want them in detail, we want them in black and white, and it's this instantaneous component of our human makeup that we want these. It really starts with the question, because there might be lots of right answers for someone else, but if they're not the right answers for us, the way that we figure that out and the way that we get to our own right answers starts with asking the right questions.
And that was the second component to why our name Seek First Ranch was so meaningful to us. The second component was with Seek First, really focusing on asking questions and the question asking process being such an important component for helping us sometimes get out of our paradigms or move us in the direction that we really desire to go.
And many times just asking what we consider to be the right questions in our situation honestly has helped Josh get out of Josh's way more than once during some really challenging times, or at least they were challenging for me.
Yeah, and I will say, and a lot of you who I can see your names on the side there, some of you who are mentors within the organization and friends of ours, you have really helped us ask questions, because sometimes I think in our own operation or in our own, when we're focused so hard on something, we don't always see things. So sometimes just having an outside perspective to help us, someone else asking us questions, gives us some time to pause and really reflect. And so we've been very encouraged and very challenged in a good way by a lot of our friends, neighbors, and some of these mentors.
Now, one of the very first questions that we have found to be really powerful, and it just kind of opens up the doors to the whole process, is if we don't know where we're going, how do we even know where to begin? Where are we going to start? And many times I think in running a ranch and doing so with a family and in trying to make a profit and take care of the land, I mean, it can be so many different layers and so much complexity, but we need to break it down into something simpler so that we can handle the decision making moving forward. So knowing where we're going becomes a really big step. And the filter that we put it through, the vehicle that we use to try and navigate through all of this complexity, is the holistic management framework. And most of you, many of you are going to know this, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but if you don't, or we just need to, maybe you just need to let Josh say it, because it does mean quite a bit to us, and it's been very powerful for us. And that has to do with it being a three-pillared system. There's the ability to build social capital in this from this type of context with this vehicle of holistic management. But you also can build biological capital, you can build financial capital, but all of the value in each of those things is very intimately connected. And where we have run into trouble is when we leave one or more of those particular items behind, when they really can't be separated entirely.
Yeah, and I would agree. And for us, we really, well, when we're being intentional about it, we work hard to keep these things in balance. So the social, which is the relationships, your relationship within, for yourself, with your family, with your community, as far as that extends, the biological, land-based resources, animals, and then the financial component, having a balance of all three of those pillars. So part of the holistic management framework is creating that context, and the context is your own personal, for yourself or for your team, whoever you'd like to include in that. But to the decision makers in your group, or those who should be involved with some kind of vision planning process, holistic management asks us to create a context. And ours will look different from other people's, because again, our goals and our visions are different from other people's. And so it's completely okay that some of these will look different from each other. So again, with some of those questions that we want to ask to get us in the direction that we desire to go, asking ourselves and spending some time reflecting, what direction are we headed as a family, as an organization, as a team, as a business? And we find in some of the holistic management schools that we teach together, people often admit to us that not everyone on their team shares the same clear vision. And oftentimes it's because these conversations just don't happen. Sometimes, I think oftentimes people make assumptions, and I find that one of the biggest detriments to communication, and which definitely affects relationships, is that barrier when we make assumptions on someone else's behalf. Now, our brain is automatically and naturally going to make assumptions because our brain wants to fill in the blanks with the pieces of information that we don't have. And oftentimes assumptions are based on some kind of previous experience. And so they can be helpful, but they can also be very damaging when I just assume Josh says something and I just assume what he means by that without maybe asking him to clarify, this is what I think you said, is that what you really meant? Or another example from our family is if we just assume what his dad is interested in doing without asking him and allowing him to actually answer that question for himself, we just fill in the blanks. Another example would be we just, all assume that we are all after the same goal. And what can happen unintentionally is that, one team member can be headed this direction and someone else can be headed this direction, and we end up just kind of spinning circles. So in order to maximize our time and have better quality of life, I think it really, really needs to start with some quality conversations, getting everybody on the same page. And I know that some things are so objective and sometimes difficult to put into words. Like one definition could look different to one family member versus someone else. So just making sure that you have time, and maybe you'd like to bring in a facilitator, even if there's not conflict, but just to make sure that everybody has a chance to say what they're thinking and express themselves clearly so that we can avoid some of those barriers in the communication.
And it's actually through that particular process that there were some long held beliefs that I had, and I'll be honest, they were based on my assumptions about other people's thoughts that were totally thrown out the window when those people actually had a chance to ask the questions that in my head I was answering for them, and had done that for quite some time. And so one assumption leaves room for error, and it builds on the next one, and then the next one, and the next one. And it's kind of like that game you might have played when you were a little kid where you sit in a circle and you're supposed to whisper the message to the next person, to the next person, to the next person. And by the time you get to the end, that particular message is so totally different than how it started. And I know that might seem kind of trivial or maybe a weird analogy, but honestly, some of the situations that we've run into, including in our own multi-generational situation, have played out that way.
I want to give one more example, because we fall into this oftentimes, and it can happen between family members. But instead of, let's just say you have, in this case, 3 separate family members. I'm just going to use Josh's mom as an example in this case. But if I have a question that really should be asked of my mother-in-law, Diana, it's not fair for me to go to Josh and say, well, what do you think? Answer a question on her behalf. Or sometimes, we ask a spouse to answer a question for the other spouse. And it just really, honestly, if there's an issue or a conflict or a concern or a question, we would encourage for ourselves and for everyone else to go directly to the person and ask for clarification. Okay, so this is something that we did between Josh's parents and us. They are on the ranch along with us. And this is a process that we have led others to, and we've done some consulting or some facilitation. We also do this in some of our introduction to holistic management schools. This is a vision planning exercise. And so these are some more reflection questions just to help you start thinking about, or to clarify your thoughts on what your vision, what your goals are. So if you would like to do this in a different time, you could take some time to reflect on the following questions. So if you could have things exactly as you truly desire them to be in an ideal situation, and then you have the autonomy to choose a number of years. For us, when we did this activity, we put a 5-year mark on it. That was something that was logical and attainable for us. But you could do a 3-year window or a 10-year, and you can do this multiple times in different timeframes. But so you choose. If everything could be as you truly desire in X number of years, focus on these 2 questions. 1, describe what you are doing. How are you spending your time? So in 5 years or whatever you choose, how do you see yourself spending your time in a truly ideal situation? And then the next one is describe. And sometimes the words don't come easily to people, but they could sketch it out or draw it. So of course you have the freedom to draw or sketch, but in one way or another, describe what the space looks like. And what we recommend is giving an opportunity for each of your team members or family members to be able to answer these questions on their own and have the space in a comfortable setting to do it. You can decide how you want that to go. If you want to maybe introduce it, at a family or team meeting and say at our next meeting, bring this back. But each person should have the ability to say what they want to be doing in that 5-year time frame and what they want the space to look like. And then when you're ready, sitting down in a comfortable situation, you have a chance then to kind of have discussions and conversations about what all of those visions look like. When you've had those conversations and you've had some clarification, then you can kind of start to use that to form your holistic context, your context for which you are going to work towards, so that all of your decision making should kind of be with that vision or with that vision goal in mind. So we're just going to show you a sample of one that we did, again, between Joshua, myself, and his parents. After we had a chance to discuss it, I think you can keep going. In 5 years, this is now a compilation of what the 4 of us each said that we would like to be doing or spending our time. We had some agreement that we really enjoy the opportunity to work together with our 3 generations, and in any given combination, we love that our kids have time to learn from the wisdom and the skill sets that their grandparents have. And this extends outside of the ranch too. I mean, this would include my family and other relatives and neighbors, but we really enjoy having the opportunity to work together and to appreciate the benefit that this multi-generational operation can bring. We like to combine work and play whenever we can. We know that there's some jobs that just aren't real desirable, but when we can find ways to do it together as a family, it makes the chores so much more fun, usually. So when we can add some enjoyment to our work, combine work and play, if we want to be intentional about doing that. The next one that was important to each of us was that each person on our team has roles that fits their talents and interests. And I mentioned earlier that I really struggled to figure out what my role should be. So it was just really needing to take some time for some personal reflection. Okay, what is it that I think I enjoy doing? What skill set do I already have? And what maybe I might be interested in, but I just might need some more education, or maybe some educational opportunities, some time to fiddle with a certain program, or to go take a class or go take a course. But we find that when we put people in the roles that they're very interested in and they have an opportunity for growth and for education, the system, our team can just function a lot more smoothly, rather than one person being expected to be a jack of all trades. We think you might as well take advantage of the different skills that people have. We also value then, yes, that opportunity for education, for rest, for recreation, and for travel. And like I mentioned before too, just the importance of really taking the time to be heard and understood and communicating in effective ways, rather than just jumping to assumptions or jumping to conclusions. And for us, the space, ideally, in 5 years, we would love to see that there's clutter-free, clear space. Clear space just gives us kind of a blank slate to be able to design and think about, just open opportunity to have it look the way that we want it to look. We could plant trees where we want to plant them, put fencing, infrastructure, those kinds of things. I mean, anything it would be possible if we had clutter-free space. We desire to have fencing that can accommodate various animal species. We have different enterprises now, including cattle. So we have cattle, horses, bulls, sheep, And we would like fencing that can hold a lamb in as well as a big bull. So just being strategic with our fencing to be able to have some multi-purpose use of the fencing. Also with buildings, in an ideal situation, if it could be just how we wanted it, we'd love to have some multi-purpose, very functional and organized buildings so that we aren't wasting that time looking for things that we need. Things are in their place. We know where to find them when we need them to make best use of our time and energy. We also value diversity of plants, animals, enterprises, and we really have a goal as a family, as a team, for this to be a therapeutic place, a place that is safe, a place that can be healing for people, where we can invite others into our ranch and give them an opportunity to spend time with nature and just enjoy God's creation, is something that we really have a desire to do.
And one of the things with actually putting this down on paper that has forced us to do, and as Tara described, we needed to really focus in on what we truly desired and not let the current obstacles or current challenges creep into that conversation. Because I think that especially as agricultural people, we tend to be willing to sacrifice, we tend to be willing to work hard, we tend to be willing to do without, whatever that might be. And because of that, we're just willing to accept things just might be hard, and that's just the way that it is. And I'm not saying that we won't have hard times or challenges, but if we don't ever reach out far enough to describe how we really want it, I think we just kind of sit where we're at, and we don't necessarily ever escape that or ever have enough motivation or inspiration to move beyond that. And by doing this and putting it on paper really has given us something that we can stare at, and honestly, it stares back at us. So when we make decisions, and any member of our team can now make decisions because we have accommodated everybody's opinion in putting this particular thing together. But to go back to what the main substance of this presentation is once again, we didn't get to this point and put any of this together by assuming someone else had the right answer. So it wasn't about just automatically having that right answer. It had everything to do with asking the right questions, or either us asking those questions or finding the people that we needed to ask the questions of us so that they could help us navigate through the process, and maybe even ask some of the hard questions that are not always easy for us to ask ourselves or immediate family members.
Right, and asking those questions that gets us to our vision. And another piece about the vision planning exercise is we want to dream this into reality instead of just focusing on all the barriers of why we can't get there and making excuses. Focus on creating this vision and dreaming it into reality, asking these questions and having a positive outlook.
So now we'd like to just give you a few brief examples of how we've taken these things, compared it to the vision that we've put together as a team, but continuing with the theme of asking questions in some of the benefits that we've gotten from that.
So like we've mentioned, this is a photo of Joshua's parents, Francis and Diana, with our kids. And we've been so blessed that we have both sets of grandparents in near proximity, especially one's just a quarter of a mile away from our house. This gives us the freedom and the flexibility with the ability for childcare. So right now the kids are down at Francis and Diana's house, so we can be here speaking with you, having some conversation uninterrupted. We love the things that our kids can learn from grandparents. And I know not everybody has the luxury of having grandparents close by or grandparents living, or even good relationships with grandparents, but just seek out some of those relationships maybe that you have with neighbors, with friends, with other people who you want to have as part of your community, to be able to have those kinds of relationships and the guidance things. So we are, very blessed to have our in-laws right here, and we can work together and we can utilize the strengths that each one of us have, because our gifts and talents are extremely different. And we appreciate that. We want to put that to use.
And it's been really beneficial, not only what Tara had talked about in terms of them being willing to step up and participate at a high level, but also their ability to step back and allow us to utilize what we've learned and make some changes and experiment with things that don't always turn out. But the ability to go and make some mistakes and learn from those things, and continue to know that we still have that trust and support and counsel when we need it.
That's right. So another part in our vision and what do we want this to look like is this, how do we work toward these goals? It can look a little chaotic sometimes. We do have 3 young kids. Our kids are currently 9 years old, 7 years old, and our youngest is 2. So how can we work together and we homeschool? Sometimes it looks messy, but we enjoy working together as a family. So this is a picture of our kids doing a combination of some schoolwork with sorting out ear tags, which is a part of a ranch chore that we like to do as a family. It makes it a little bit more enjoyable. So the kids help us inside and they help us outside. We like to be outside and have a job to do. So we bring our kids along and we put up temporary fencing together, and sometimes they complain, but we make it happen.
And honestly, one of the big kind of aha moments for me was about 3 years ago when we were setting up some temporary fencing. And to be honest with you, it's one of those things that Tara and I could have just gone and done and gotten it done a whole lot quicker. And it would have been done in such a way that we would have been confident in its ability to be the infrastructure that we put in. And yet our kids, we wanted them to be a part of it. But it wasn't until one of them at about 4 years of age said, "Why are we even doing this?" that we had to take a step back and explain, okay, this is the why behind it. And I tell you, their energy and their willingness to be obedient to the instructions that were given totally changed, but we owed that to them, and we just unintentionally omitted that step.
I think it's a testimony to what asset kids can bring to an operation. They ask a lot of why questions. And like Josh mentioned, those why questions are what this is all about. Why are we doing this? And sometimes having to justify why, if it really doesn't make sense when we explain it back, maybe we need to shift, or maybe it just gives us clarification for what we're doing. But I remember when this photo was taken, it was shortly after we had moved to the ranch. And like I had said, I just really struggled because I didn't know what to do here. I didn't know what jobs needed to be done. It wasn't so much that I didn't think that I was capable of helping. I just didn't know what to do. It was outside of my skill set. And Josh would just go and he'd do things on his own or perceive that he needed to just, well, it'll be faster if I do it myself. I'm just going to get this done. And once I realized, okay, so by fencing, you're just putting in these posts and we can all walk outside together and enjoy the sunshine together. It seemed like a no-brainer. It's something that I'm capable of doing. I just didn't know what I needed to do. So it was explaining the process, what needed to happen, knowing that the kids and I were capable of doing it, and getting outside and getting it done.
And so much of this process really got summed up for me here about a month ago. I was listening to a podcast an interview of James Rogers. He's the current ranch manager of the Wine Cup Gamble Ranch in Nevada. And one thing really stuck with me. And he said, we have a pretty good handle on management. In fact, we maybe even overmanage at times, to where it's not a lack of management that has become the problem, it's a lack of leadership. And that really has stuck with me, because when we first moved to the ranch, it was about me thinking I needed to do everything, or I wasn't worth my salt as a rancher. And it really wasn't about me having to do everything. It was about, as Tara said, finding the right roles for the right people. And that leadership position can shift from person to person. It's not always the same, but needing to do that and recognize the value that every person brings to the table. And one of the reasons that it was really difficult for me to even stop and think about that stuff is because I was too busy doing all the time. And when you're so busy working in the business, it's hard to take a step back sometimes and start working on the business. And one of the things that I realized is that our probably, at least this is my opinion, the most precious asset that we have is our time. It's not necessarily grass or cows or fencing or just land in general or even money. it's our time. And when our time is not valued, and which I think that farmers and ranchers tend not to do a very good job of, is value their own time. They're willing to make a tremendous amount of sacrifices for very little value sometimes, or very little money anyway. I should maybe say it's encapsulated all in value. But we also don't leverage our time very well, or at least I wasn't leveraging my time. So one example of that is the bale grazing that you see in this particular photo. And yes, there's some work that goes into this in the fall of the year and that sort of thing. But again, we did this sort of thing as a family. We got a pretty good lesson in education for all of the different people involved. In fact, there's a number of people that drive by that stop in and want to know what the heck's going on with all of those bales out in the field. But it gives, again, an opportunity for education, information, sharing with others. But the biggest thing that this process has given me is time. Whereas in the past, it would be hours and hours of feeding on an everyday basis. Whereas now with the bale grazing, even though we had to take some time on a nice afternoon in October to set some things up, now during the winter, literally, and our older son Jameson and I did this just for fun last winter. We timed how long it took to do chores. And to feed this cow herd of about 120 pair during the winters, it took 12 minutes every 3 days. And of course, that was the part of running out there, rolling up one poly wire, checking the water, and going back. And what that did is it gave me more time to plan, more time with family, more time to work on strategizing, all of those sorts of things, which really is where the value is earned. Not that there isn't hard work to do, but we need to get those things in the right kind of balance to make that all work.
We like to take some time too as a family to just stop and enjoy nature. And we were in the middle of doing chores this day, and the kids were just having so much fun. And this picture reminds me of a conversation I had with our friends Annie and John Carlson. And I remember discussing something about Annie brought up something along the lines of, why would you need a vacation from your life? And I couldn't really wrap my brain around it at the time, because I love vacations. I enjoyed traveling, but I really did see those kinds of vacations as a little bit of escape, a break from what we were doing. And so I'm probably misquoting her on this, but yes, something along the lines of, why would you need an escape from your life? Just live your life in a way that you don't need escaping. And we still enjoy traveling, and we still, of course, enjoy vacations when we can make those work. But we've really kind of resonated. I wrestled with that concept. Just, stop in the moment and just enjoy the time. I mean, these days are precious for us. We're so blessed to have these kids in our life, and we're so blessed to have these other people that we really want to take some time to appreciate nature, to appreciate our circumstances, and have this grateful mindset of gratitude and appreciation.
One of the things too that we try to focus on is understanding where relationships need to be built and where they need to continue to be refined and strengthened. And of course, with Tara and I, as much as this is a multi-generational ranch, as much as we want the kids involved, there's times where just her and I need to focus on things that we need to do. So if we can do something that we enjoy, like riding horse, we can go check pastures, check water, check cattle, but it's probably the conversations that happen when we slow down, when we don't take the four-wheelers or the side-by-side, and we do some things that, it's slower pace and some might consider it less efficient, actually for us ends up being far more effective. Now, there are days where we don't have time to do this, but whenever we can and whenever we make time to do it, we have found great value in making time to do these sorts of things. And I think sometimes, and I know I'm guilty of it, we can just get in such a rush, in such a hurry, that we don't take the time that we need for some really valuable things. Now, how this has played out from a business standpoint then on our ranch is we're just going to share with you a few of the enterprises that we do. The one that was here and has been here long before we were here was cattle. And we have changed it some based on changing calving date, which then changed, management with grazing, management in terms of use on the land. It's therefore had to change our marketing and just how we put all of these pieces together. And quite honestly, how this plays into our quality of life and achieving our vision is finding animals that work for us, that fit the environment as best we can. And that's definitely a work in progress. But it's basically to allow nature to do as much of the heavy lifting as possible, because the more heavy lifting that nature does, the less that we have to do. And that gives us more time to focus on other things and still participate in the things that we really enjoy, like the cattle enterprise. And of course, that goes not just for the growing season when things are hopefully green and functioning well and it's easy to be outside, but also being very strategic in how we handle things like the winter season. And I went from being a big proponent of, hey, we can really work on soil health and management of the land during the summer, and then we just have to survive the winter. Well, because winter can last, and of course this year's maybe not the best example, but because winter can last for so long, we need to find opportunities in that itself. And that's where the bale grazing came from. That's where moving cattle on a regular basis, even during the winter, came from. And as you can see here, I took this shot from on top of a horse. This is something that I will continue to do because it's something that I enjoy and it's something that I value. And honestly, I do a much better job of observation when I'm moving slower and have a better view on the landscape. And some would say, well, horses aren't something we want to do, and that's perfectly fine. Find what tools do fit you and allow you to be who you want to be as a manager, and then also as whatever other roles that you play.
And I would say, and that's why context in the holistic management philosophy, having that holistic context is specific to you because it is specific to your goals, your talents, your desires.
Mm-hmm. One of the things too, and Tara had alluded this a little bit before, is wanting to not only get our kids involved, but wanting to do stuff off the ranch. So our kids, our goal with our kids is that they not only recognize that we do things as a family and that chores don't always have to be a grind, but we want them to learn the business side of things as well. We don't want to force that on them, and that's why we try to give them choice. And one of the choices they made a couple of years ago is that they wanted to get into the livestock business or have their own livestock enterprise. And of course, we asked them, well, how are you going to earn that money to do that? And it was their idea to utilize the boulevard on Tara's parents' house that's up near Lake Sakakawea, and basically do an old-fashioned lemonade stand. But in there, they learned counting money. They learned the ability to deal with customers. And honestly, it was slow going for a while, and then there'd be a rush, and they learned how to handle those sorts of things. But most importantly, they learned that when people asked them, why are you doing this? It wasn't to earn money. It was to earn money to put towards the sheep enterprise that they were really looking forward to. And I'll let Tara talk a little more about that.
Yeah, another desire for quality of life for us was we wanted in our vision was to have diversity of enterprises, diversity of animals, things that fit the landscape, but also fit the lifestyle and the ages of our kids to where they could take on some involvement. So our kids did actually use some of their lemonade stand money to buy their own sheep. And that was kind of a trial thing for us. And we decided we really liked it. So we took on a hair sheep enterprise. And that's something that I've really, really enjoyed, just the size and the manageability of that. For us, we just want our kids to be involved, and we want to give opportunities for them to be able to do that.
And finding ways for them to be involved at a lower risk, to be safe. And as they get older, as they get bigger, they're going to be able to do more things, and they're already doing more things. But just watching their confidence grow, being able to participate in something that wasn't overwhelming or so intimidating, and that they can grow with in the process, has really been a joy for me to be able to watch that. And also just feel more comfortable with their participation level.
And challenges and learning curves, definitely. But it's been good. I can't get out and I choose not to wrestle a cow, but it's fun to try to move sheep or or sort out sheep. It's something that we have fun doing as a family, the times that we need to do that. So something else, as we wrap up here, that was key to our business and for me to help find my role. Again, when we looked at the talents and the interests of the different family members on our team, Joshua was finding himself doing a lot of everything and almost everything. And so when we had those conversations of identifying and clarifying roles, Joshua's dad, Francis, is a very skilled mechanic and a very hard worker. And so he's able to take on a lot of the maintenance and physical things that need to happen on the ranch. Joshua leads up the strategic and the financial planning and the grazing planning, and he's kind of the brains of the operation. You can elaborate on that if you want to. We utilize his mom, Diana's skills of being organized and helping us with childcare, and so that's a powerful presence in our team. And when I was really wrestling with what my role beyond fencing and doing some of these little tasks, I really learned that I enjoy the marketing aspect. I always have loved being with people. I love hearing people's stories and getting to know them. I care very deeply about human health. And so raising grass-fed beef on a ranch, and then me having those kind of conversations and relationships with the consumers, with our customers, was really, really fun for me. So I needed to get some training, but I was able to develop our website and market directly to consumers with our grass-fed beef and obtaining a retail license. So there's a couple of other things that we have on our website. We have opportunities to connect. We have upcoming schools. We have several different things. Of course, like I mentioned, we have the grass-fed beef, but it's just, I know direct marketing is not for everybody, but I really enjoy doing it. So it was a really positive shift when we focus on people being in the right roles, when we focus on our vision things, what do we want this to look like, and how can we dream that into reality?
In playing, anytime you build a team, in my opinion, you start with what the strengths are, and then you build upon that. And sure, there's going to be some weaknesses in places or some voids, and you figure out how to fill those in, whether it's a member of your team or someone else. But when I finally realized that I didn't have to do everything, and I'm not sure why Josh thought that in the first place, because I am surrounded in this family by some incredible and tremendous people, but I think I just had a hard time letting go. And one of my mentors told me, this was a while ago, but it has stuck with me. But he told me, he said, eventually, Josh, he said, if you're going to be sustainable in this type of industry, he said, you need to stop acting like a ranch employee and start acting more like a ranch manager. Stop thinking that everything is just another job and start thinking about how this is a business that serves others. And once we started developing more of that mindset, I've been able to let go of some of those things, and I've been able to give autonomy to other people, and they have not only taken that up and done a good job with it, they have carried it much further than I could have ever done that. And so I'm very appreciative to be surrounded by, I shouldn't say surrounded by, because it leaves me as the focal point, and that's not the deal. It's about being a part of a team that really has put together this vision, bought into it entirely, and boy, the way that we can pull in the same direction when all of us are pulling the same direction makes a big difference. But it really comes back to this. Why do we seek and keep seeking? It's about asking the right questions. It's not about just grabbing onto the latest, greatest answer and hoping that it's right for us. It's about asking the right questions and surrounding ourselves with people that can ask us those right questions. And I would encourage anybody to try and do the same thing. And of course, then putting it through the filter of our vision, of knowing what our direction is and where we are headed. Without that, it's still a bit scattershot, and being able to know that direction lends itself to certain questions that then put us on the right road.
Yeah, and there's still always going to be challenges of various levels. But we just wanted to be better armored and have a better mental perspective to be able to handle it and navigate it. So we appreciate the opportunity to get to explain to you or just clarify how holistic management and creating a vision and a context has been very, very meaningful and important in our operation. If you would like to connect with us, we always love to connect you to other people, share resources, mentors, help point you in the right direction. So you're always welcome to contact us, check out what schools are available. We can also point you in the direction of what different organizations have available, but our website is listed here, seekfirstranch.com. We've got upcoming events, and you can definitely get a hold of us if there's something that you think we can help with.
Just thank you. That's the conclusion to our presentation. And like Tara said, we enjoy telling our story, and hopefully you got something from it.
Thanks, Josh and Tara. If there are questions for Josh and Tara, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, you're more than welcome to do that. Or if you want to post them in the chat, either way is fine. We do have some time here, and like I said, I don't want to cut these off. If we have good conversation going, I think we should keep that online. So I do have a question for you. You mentioned the schools. Do you have any in North Dakota or surrounding states that are coming up?
We do have one coming up the first week of February. That one's going to be in Faith, South Dakota. It's a Next Steps holistic management school, which is basically our version of maybe some people who have been through it before, but maybe have other members of their family or business team that would like to come along. And so it brings out material and information that is actually applicable to both. So it might be a little bit of a review for some, but it also carries it further for those that have been through it before, but also brings in enough of a review of the previous stuff. So even if it's some people's first time, they can still keep pace, gain benefit, and participate to a high level.
And we're really excited about this one because we just communicated with some of the organizers, and the class is currently about 2/3 at capacity, and about, what would you say, about a third of the people who've registered so far are teenagers, are actually kids. And so we're really excited. What we've wanted was, because we have this vision of everyone on the team needs to understand the direction that they're headed for that clarity. And we just, spent 45 minutes to an hour talking about why that's such a big deal for us and why it was such a game changer. We invite people in holistic management. So many times you go to workshops, no matter what it is, and you're sitting there thinking, oh, I wish my spouse was here. I wish my dad were here. I wish my neighbor were here. I wish so-and-so could hear this. I wish the rest of my team could all be here, getting the same information, having the same kind of training. And so we've seen this need in holistic management really create a space and a class that's conducive to having spouses and family members and neighbors. And this is phenomenal because now we actually have kids that are in the process of their part of the ranch or the farm or the business, and they get to be exposed to this stuff and learn from the older, wiser, more experienced people in the class. And we're just bringing everybody along. So that's why we kind of have this philosophy of this Next Steps movement in holistic management, because we want to include people and bring people on this journey with us so that we can have these shared visions. Again, contexts are always going to look different according to people's circumstances, but let's bring people along and mentor each other.
And quite honestly, I'm kind of excited to ask these kids their version of how the ranch operates, because I have a feeling that we might gain a little different perspective from them.
Yeah.
Maybe their parents might disagree with their perspective, but I think it would be unique and refreshing, and definitely add to a the growth of any given business or family.
Yeah, and so to further answer your question, we don't have anything scheduled in North Dakota right now, but for anyone in North Dakota or outside of North Dakota, wherever you are listening from, watching from, we are happy to come right to your area, to your community, and schedule something to work with you, to kind of accommodate a little bit about who you'd like to invite. But if we can tap into your resource base of people, we would love to come to your area. We'd be happy to put on a school there, or just further connect people in whatever holistic management options are available.
Well, I know when we took class, I remember specifically going into the class, and you have in your mind all these questions that you have, and I love how you started it out this way, because it just reminded me of when we went through it. But you go into it and you have all these questions in your mind, and you're like, oh, I'm going to get all these answers. I'm going to come out of here and I'm going to just know where I want to go, and I'm not going to have to, I'm going to get the answers. Well, then we walk out of the class and I'm like, I think we have more questions now than what we did before. But that really is the purpose. And it's thought provoking, and it makes you sit down. The other note that I'd like to make too is I think one of the exercises that you go through in those classes that I think is beneficial, you talked about assuming. Well, the roles, in each ranching operation. I assume that Donnie enjoys sitting down and doing book work.
Donnie?
Maybe he doesn't. And I know that exercise that we went through with each person, sitting down and saying, okay, these are the things that I like doing, and these are the things that I don't like doing, and these are the things that I'll do if I have to do them. But I just really appreciate the different steps that you go through in that process.
Yeah, we do too.
Are there any questions out there? I don't think I have anything in the chat right now. Like I said, if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself.
Or even if you don't have a question, but maybe you have a testimony to where you had an aha moment or something that resonated with you and your operation, and you'd like to share your bits of wisdom with the rest of us. We always love hearing advice for us too. We're always looking to grow and to challenge ourselves.
Oh, there's a post in the chat now. It says, "Hi, Mom." I'm pretty sure that's one of my kids helping their dad. There's always got to be one funny one in the group, right?
And if there's questions that people have that maybe they're not comfortable or don't desire to ask on an open forum like this, we'll try and help any way that we can. So by all means, go to our website. You'll find our contact information there, and you can certainly ask those particular questions. Mm-hmm. Chances are, if you have a question, there's going to be others that have that same question. So I'd encourage you to do it here if you're comfortable. But if you're not, there's other avenues to try and explore those questions as well.
Yeah.
Josh.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Do you find as you go along, whether on your ranch or people that you know for a while, do you find, like, my holistic context, I feel, is changing a little bit, but I'm not sure how to change it, or I'm not sure which direction I really need to go. So what kind of advice would you give, or what kind of questions would one have to ask to figure that out? Because we kind of established this holistic context, and now we find that it's kind of changing a little bit, but I'm not really sure how.
Well, I think you're absolutely right that your context is not something that's set in stone. It's not something that's going to, once you lock it in, then all of a sudden it's your context for the rest of your career, or for even the next 5 to 10 years. I think the first one oftentimes can be the most difficult, just to kind of get off the ground and get started. But as your life changes, as you're to a different stage of life or stage of career, or something just happens in life that changes your situation, then you need to revisit it. And honestly, we probably don't revisit ours as often as we should. But we've helped a lot of different people step through that process. And of course, we can't answer the questions for them. We can just ask the questions. But even then, even if people have an established context, we tend to start with the questions that we offered here about what do you want to be doing, and what does your space look like. And usually that tends then, if you even have to force yourself to do that, even if it seems like, well, this is redundant, I've done this before, it tends to open the door to further conversation, especially if you can do it with obviously the other people that you have in your family or in your team. Sometimes, even if you've set this before, and we went through this process as well, is that we tried to and took a good first stab at our holistic context when we first did it, and then several times since then. But there have been times where, like, we need to bring someone in, or we need to just have a conversation with someone that can look at our situation, that doesn't have skin in our game, and therefore can ask some of those particular questions. So it doesn't surprise me that it's a little bit of a struggle to revisit that. It also doesn't surprise me that your situation's changed, and it will for most people.
Yeah. And I would say too, kind of just to reiterate some of the stuff that we talked about earlier, if you would see potential benefit in going back to that vision planning exercise that we showed earlier, putting a time frame in there that would be relevant to you, given the age of your kids, given your current circumstances, situation with other people who are decision makers on your place, and then just allowing everybody, like, print off that sheet of paper and giving everybody an opportunity to say, in this many years, like, are kids graduating in so many years? Are they becoming adults? Are they transitioning to a new phase? Whatever it is. So pick some kind of time frame and then answer those questions, again, being really mindful of how it is, how you want it to be, if it could be exactly the way that it could be, if it could be exactly how you truly desired, and really focus on that, not on the barriers for all the reasons why it couldn't be like that. But allowing each person to do that for himself or herself, and then scheduling a time to meet to kind of go over and discuss your individual visions, and then see if there's some common ground there that you can work toward.
And also then being able to take that, if you have your contacts from before, which I assume you probably would, then put them side by side and compare them, and see what some of those changes are from one to the next. And then, most importantly, ask the question, why? Mm-hmm. Is it simply just a change in situation, a change in age, a change in enterprises? What is it? Why did that change? And are you okay with that change? And if you're not, then we start jumping into the brainstorming process, and then we go from there. Mm-hmm. But basically, we try and open the doors to this thing once again, without having too many preconceived notions about how it was before, and not letting that play too large an influence on what it might look like now, because it could be very different.
We have a question, and I'm sure this is a question from in the back of a lot of people's minds. Have you mentored or facilitated a business or family that had someone that was resistant to going through a holistic process, or simply adopting some changes? And the second part to that is, what are some tips or advice to dealing with those situations?
Yes. So it's not uncommon that there's resistance. And yes, we have facilitated some of those. Oftentimes we find that people really like to share their opinion. And so if you phrase it in a way that, hey, here's a philosophy, or here's a piece of information, or here's a concept, whatever it is, would you just take a look at it, explore it, read this, whatever's applicable? And would you just mind giving me your opinion on that? Or you could even take it in a slightly different direction of saying, like, I don't know if I made the assumption that you might disagree with this, but then I realized I was making an assumption on your behalf, because I assumed that you would say such and such, but that's not really fair to you. I want you to be able to speak for yourself. So I'm trying to do a better job of letting you speak for yourself. Would you tell me what you really think about this? And maybe your assumption was correct, and maybe that they'll be honest, But I think oftentimes people really are moved by the fact that you take the time to admit your humility, that you've made an assumption and you're allowing them to speak. It tells that person that you value what they have to say. Another angle you can take is, hey, you know what, this probably isn't for you, but would you just come, just check out this seminar or come to this workshop and just tell me what you don't like about it? Oftentimes, again, they still have the right to have their own opinion. Everyone has the right to their opinion, but you're honoring their right to have their opinion. You're honoring their right to express what they think. You're giving them an opportunity, again, without making that assumption. I will also say that we have really worked to encourage people before we move into the personal kind of coaching and facilitation. We highly recommend that people actually do take an introduction to holistic management school of some sort, because then you already start to understand the concepts and the terms. And then we can just move a lot quicker if we do decide to go the independent coaching or facilitation or consulting route. So we do highly encourage people attend a holistic management school first. And again, and if you have a family member, or a team member, business partner who's resistant, use one of the strategies that I suggested, where hey, you're probably not going to like this, but that's me making an assumption. Why would you just be willing to come here and tell me why you think it won't work on our place?
And by stating it that way, saying that I would really like you to come for me, if you're the son or the daughter or the spouse or something like that, there's probably in many cases a better chance that they will come. Well, I will come for you, but I'm not going because I want to. Mm-hmm. We've heard that often. And so how you invite is a big part of it, or sometimes just the fact that you invite in the first place is a big deal. Now, that being said, we've had a number of situations where we didn't even realize that there was conflict or that there was issues. And as soon as we started to dig in a little bit, we found that. And the reason I bring that up is because I don't think there's ever been a situation where whoever could debate better or argue better ended up winning, and then the situation magically got better. It was about actually breaking things down further and going a bit deeper, almost seemingly backwards, but it was the idea of getting back to the point of building trust and sharing opinions in such a way that people could say, okay, I understand you want to try this. I don't agree with that, but I also understand that the reason you're doing it is because you want to be the next generation on this place, for example. And so, and sometimes those particular questions are hard to ask of your relatives, of your spouse or your mother or your father or grandpa or whoever it might be. And so that oftentimes is a role that a facilitator like us or someone else, it wouldn't have to be us, that can ask those questions. Because at the end of the day, if your family is united, even if they're united because they're not particularly fond of Josh anymore, that's okay. If we got to the point where you guys are moving in the right direction, I was just the facilitator or Tara was just the facilitator. It's our job not to be liked at the end, but to have facilitated a process that got some groundwork done to be able to move forward in a positive direction.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes hard questions just need to be asked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true. And I would say, I mean, we try to encourage anybody that we talk to go as a family or go as a couple or go as, that entity, because the value that you get out of it is just 10 times what you would as an individual. And trying to go home, and I think about going to one myself and trying to come home and explain all of that to Donnie, and it's overwhelming. Mm-hmm. So I would definitely try to use some of those, ideas to try to, get as many people incorporated as you can. We do have one other question from Shane Maddock. He was on Facebook Live. He said he may have missed this, so he said, indulge me, but is there any surprises that caught you off guard in implementing your holistic practices?
Well, this is probably me being maybe a little bit vulnerable here, but one of the things, I put a lot of pressure on myself when we got here, and it's because I feel so extremely fortunate and so blessed to have had the experiences, the training, the mentors, the friendships, those sorts of things that I had, being able to be involved with Burleigh County, being involved with the Grazing Coalition, and being surrounded by people on a daily basis that honestly, they didn't let you have a bad day for very long, because you could sort through things, reason through things, and honestly come out on the right side of whatever the obstacle or challenge was. And there was just so much benefit that I got from that. Now, that being said, it's not that I assumed that I'd be able to just, hit the ground running with the ranch and never make any mistakes, and this was just going to be so totally lucrative and everything else. It wasn't that. But I didn't realize that once I got disconnected from those people on a daily basis, how much that mattered. And because right before we moved to the ranch was kind of the peak of some of my traveling and speaking, I was at a point where I was starting to get a little bit burnt out. And so I went from that to the ranch here, where I could just be on the ranch and just not go anywhere. And although that was good respite, I also stopped going to workshops. I stopped being involved in the educational things. And even with all the training that I had and all the experiences that I had, I found out just how slippery the cultural slope can be in any given area. And I'm not pinning that on my neighbors or on the community or anything like that. It's just when you don't continually put yourself around people that are supportive, opportunistic, and positive, that slope gets really slippery really quick. And I did that for about 2 years. And I look back and honestly, I could not believe some of the decisions that I made. And luckily, none of them that were game changers or deal breakers for the ranch, but some of the decisions that I made were just based on what I almost impulsively thought was the right thing to do at the time because other people were doing it. And it didn't align with our holistic context necessarily. It didn't get having the questions applied to it the way that it should have. And so to your question, Shane, about what things maybe didn't play out the way that I thought or that sort of thing, if you trust the process and you utilize this vehicle of holistic management and stay true to the roots of what you believe in, and of course, our case, our scripture and that sort of thing, that won't lead you astray. It's when it's us that go astray in that process when we don't stay connected to the things that we need to. And when I did that, the grazing management suffered, and the use of grass became a symptom of bad management. The health of the animals, the connection to my family, the finances, all of those things suffered when I didn't trust the process and didn't stay connected to the people that I needed to.
Because I think it was kind of a slippery slope when we kind of slippery slope into that crisis management mindset. And I remember a very strong turning point, a shift in perspective for Joshua was when you had a conversation with some of the mentors. And I believe it was a conversation with Jed and maybe Cody and some other mentors where they actually helped him, ask Josh some questions and mention some things. And it kind of gave Josh a shift of mindset and some permission to just reflect back on some things. And those conversations with the mentors really helped put things into focus for you. And then for us, we're in this together. And so these conversations too, about how can we balance and how can we be more intentional with our time? So yeah, and it is, I think, things don't always just happen like boom, all of a sudden we're in crisis mode. Sometimes there are circumstances that come up, those kind of acute things, but this chronic where it becomes a slippery slope, like where we just are not focused, or we're more focused on in the business things rather than the on the business vision planning, not having our weekly or monthly meetings, those kinds of things. And then before we know it, we're not where we want to be.
And if things happen slow enough, I think we can kind of slowly get lulled into acceptance mode that this is just how it is, and we're just going to have to deal with it. And we've been very intentional, or at least we try to be, that if something's not how we want it, we ask the question, is this a short-term acute thing, or is it a long-term chronic thing? And we just don't accept things that we don't want. And I'm not saying we have all the answers to those things, but we are more than willing to ask the questions. And to us, that's the starting point.
Okay. Well, I don't see any other questions. I'll just offer it out there one more time. If there's anybody that would like to come off mute and ask a question that way, feel free to do that. While you're thinking about that, I will just remind you that our next session is on Thursday evening at 7 Mountain Time, 8 Central Time. Thursday evening will be our group of partners that will be joining us from the Fish and Wildlife Service, Ducks Unlimited, and the North Dakota Natural Resources Trust. So we're taking a little swing a different direction. And then we have 3 following weeks after that. So if there aren't any other questions, I'd like to thank Josh and Tara for joining us again. Like you said, I always feel after you met with a group of people like this, you always feel rejuvenated and you feel ready to go and hit the road running the next morning to try something different or test yourself or question yourself on things. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for, it's just great to be a part of a community, and this is a supportive community, and we're happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, I mean, one of our main goals with this was to try to, I don't know, it just seems like, you have all winter long to sit, and Zoom is obviously not the most ideal way of doing things, but yet it's also a great way to reach out to people that you normally wouldn't be able to reach out to through a live event. So I hope everybody enjoyed it, and we look forward to having you back on Thursday night. And thank you guys once again. So
yeah, there's some good topics coming up. We're excited.
yes. Okay. We'll see you guys later.
Thank you.
You bet.
It's live on Facebook.